Good afternoon. My name is Joanna Graber. I'm a member of our training and support team here at Hawks Learning. Thank you for joining us for this afternoon's session of our webinar summer training series. Today we're going to be covering our reporting and analytics tools. So we're going to check out what's available in the gradebook. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have at the end of the presentation. So feel free to enter those in the Q&A box that appears at the bottom of your Zoom window. So I'll get to those towards the end, but to go ahead and get started, we're going to log into the gradebook and navigate to the Reports tab. Now on the Reports tab, you'll notice that we have quite a few different reports for you to choose from. So a lot of different options here. Now, we've gone ahead and highlighted some of our key reports here along the top. So these are the reports that I'm going to be covering today. But if you do have any questions about any of these other reports we have down below, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A. So we're going to get started in the All Student Scores report. Now, the All Student Scores report is the best place to go to get a kind of bird's eye view of your students' grades. So you'll be able to see all of your students and all of their assignment grades all in one place. So you'll select your section, click Display Student Scores, and you'll then be able to see your full list of students, grades, and then those different categories. So your assignment groups will be listed out here. Now, something that is newer that we did just release this past week is this little button here, which allows you to view graphs about your students' grades. So your final grades, you'll be able to see these different options. So when you click on this, you're able to see a bar graph, for example, or a pie chart, or some other statistical analysis here as well. So you're able to see at a glance the number of students that fall into these different grade ranges. There under the pie chart, you're able to see the same, but rearranged a bit differently. So depending on how you like to view your student data. And then here we do have the average, median, standard deviation, min, max, and quartiles. So all of that is now available for you to view quickly and easily right from that final grades tab. So again, it was just that little graph button. Now here, as I said, you have your assignment groups listed out. So you have homework, tests, and quizzes in this particular case. Now for tests and quizzes, those grades will be raw scores. So those will be your traditional grades that you'll see here. But under homework, you're going to see our different symbols to show you the grades for your students' homework assignments. Now, the reason we do this is because of the mastery approach. There is a small variety of grades that your students will have. So you may see, and what you'd like to see, is a lot of these green check marks. These indicate that your student successfully completed the assignment on time, they reached that mastery percentage, and they therefore earned a 100%. So any of these green check marks are going to indicate a 100. Now, if you see a yellow check mark, that indicates that the student completed the assignment late, and it was therefore graded according to your late penalty. So it means that they did reach that mastery percentage, but not in time for the due date. So in this case, we can see that since they completed it late, they received a 25% based on my late penalty versus the traditional 100%. Now, an orange clock indicates that the student has a 0. So this means that the student either did not reach the mastery percentage prior to the due date, or they never accessed the assignment. Now, the way to tell the difference here is if you click on that actual assignment, if they did try the assignment, you will see the option to review their assignment. If you click on an orange clock and you do not see the option to review, it means that they never tried the assignment. So that's how you'll be able to tell the difference. Now you'll notice when I do click on any of these symbols, I'll see the option to edit an individual student's score or their individual due date without affecting the rest of the class. So this is where you can come to directly update those dates or grades for an individual student. Now, if you do make any of those changes, you will see either little asterisks appear or a little dagger symbol. Those will indicate to you that you've made a change at a glance so that you can quickly see if a particular student is asking for a lot of exceptions. Now, the other option you have here is to review the assignment. So if you click on this, you'd be able to see question by question exactly which types of questions or which versions of the questions the students received in what order they received them, and how they answered each question, including how much time they spent on each question. So we'll take a deeper look at reviewing an assignment once we move on into another one of our tools, but you can access it right from here. Now you may also see some of these blue symbols. What that means is that there is a due date associated with this particular assignment. However, it has not yet passed, so it's not affecting the student's grades yet. Now, if you do forget what any of these symbols mean, you can always click on the Show Legend button over on the right, and you'll see a quick breakdown of exactly what the symbols mean. All right, so that is the All Student Scores report. So now I'm going to move back to the Reports tab, and I want to point out detailed student grades. So we'll take a quick look at this. Detailed student grades is going to give you the exact same information as all student scores, but on a per student basis rather than all of your students at once. So here you can either start typing your section or your student's name to filter down your results, or you can switch to classic view, and that will let you access drop-down menus to select a student. Now, once I've selected a student, I'm able to see all of their assignments and all of their grades. If I want to change their due date or their score, I can do so right from here, or review the assignment under Actions. Or if I click right on the assignment name, I can also review the assignment from here. So again, I'll show you what that review option looks like in just a few minutes. Now, a few other options you have right from this detailed student grades report are that you can email this student directly. You can also transfer them if you need to transfer them for any reason to a different section. You can also view their lesson activities, so you'll be able to see their time on task information. You can print this page, or you can export these grades. So we'll go ahead and click on that View Lesson Activity, so that way you can see what that looks like. Now, when we do this, it is going to take us to our time per student report for this student. So in this case, there is no time information here, but traditionally you would see the student's time on each assignment. So let's see if we were to grab another student. And you know what, we'll clear these dates out here just so we have a wider range. And that's something that you can always do for your students to see more information. So for example, with this particular student, I can see how many attempts they took and how long they spent in each mode of the courseware. All right. So now going back to reports, we're now going to move into search by criteria. So search by criteria is a really great report where you can filter down your students based on multiple criteria. So I've seen some instructors use this report to identify their students who may be struggling, that they really want to focus some extra time on. But I've also, on the other hand, seen instructors use this report to identify their star students who are really doing very well in the class and really keeping up, to send them a note of encouragement. So you can use this in several different ways, and you can see there are several different activities and grade categories that you can sort your students based on. For example, maybe if I did want to find my students who are struggling, maybe you want to find my students who have an overall grade between a 0 and 70, and maybe my students who haven't logged in for 3 days. Now, just for the sake of our data, I'm going to uncheck this one, just so that we have some data to look at here. And then when I filter the report, I'm going to see the full list of students who meet these criteria. So these are the students I have that have not logged in 3 days. So likely I'd want to send them a message, which I can do right from here. If I click send message, it will then let me send a message to all of these students at once. If I check that checkbox, it will blind copy all of them so they won't see each other's names in the list. But this will allow me to send them all a message with something along the lines of, see me during my maybe virtual office hours, or please log into the courseware to improve your grade, or something along those lines. Or even if it's just something, you know, maybe it's a reminder that midterms are coming up, and that's a good opportunity to improve their grade. Or maybe on the other hand, you use this to identify those students who are performing well, and you could send them a message saying, you know, keep up the good work, or something like that. Now, if you do find a particular combination of these filters that you really like, you do have the option to save those filter options. So if you do that, next time you come in, you will just click right on one single button for this combination of filters, and you can view the report again. So this is another one where you can, if you'd like to come back maybe once a week or so, or every couple of weeks, to check if the students are dropping off of this list and responding to your email, you can go ahead and just click that one button instead of reselecting your filters here. All right, so now we're going to go back to reports and into Assignment Reviewer. Now, Assignment Reviewer is one of our most comprehensive reports. So this is where we have combined quite a bit of data for you all into one place. So for this tool, we can view either lesson data or web test data. You will have the same options for both web tests and lessons. For now, we're just going to take a look at the lesson data. Just know you have all those same options if you were to switch to web tests. Now here you can either select your section or leave it at all sections. And here you'll see first up at the top a bar graph showing you submission status. So this is where you can see at a glance, are my students completing their assignments on time? So the green, again, same color coordination here as there was in the all student scores report. We're going to have this green, we'll have the green here. And then we will have for the completed on time, successfully mastered, and therefore 100, or we'll see the orange for overdue, therefore 0, or the yellow to indicate late. So we can get that information at a glance here, but we also can scroll down and see the full list of assignment names and then our overall class statistics. So I can see how many of my students certified and how long on average they were spending in each mode of the courseware. Now, just as a reminder, something that you do want to be looking for here in the time on task data is that based on our mastery approach, you do want your students spending most of their time in practice and therefore spending less time in certify. So really preparing themselves in practice, using the learning aids where they're appropriate, so that way they are really learning from their mistakes. They're in the practice mode, so that way when they get to certify, they are able to get right through without any trouble. So maybe in this case, for example, we like seeing a little bit more time in practice than in certify. Now, if I wanted to take a look at a particular lesson, I could click right on that lesson name, and it's going to bring me to another page of data here. Now, one of the kind of rules of thumb of Assignment Reviewer is the more you click, the more you are able to find out. So you'll just keep digging deeper the more you are clicking. So here, now that I've clicked on that particular lesson, I can now see all of my students and how they each performed on this particular assignment. So I'm able to see their name, whether or not they mastered the assignment, how many attempts they took, when they completed it, and then their personal time on task data. So this is a really great place to check if you have a student tell you, I'm having a lot of trouble with this particular assignment. I spent hours on it and I can't seem to get through it. You can come to this report first to verify their story, but also to see how they're spending their time. If you see they have 5 attempts at certify, they spent 45 minutes in certify and 2 minutes in practice, you have your immediate recommendation for them right there. Go ahead and back into that practice, spend some time there, use that tutor option with the step-by-step walkthroughs, use the error-specific feedback to help you learn from your mistakes. And then when you're feeling more comfortable with the content, go back to certify and try again. So this is a really good place to kind of pinpoint that advice you may have for your students who are struggling here. Now, if you wanted to see a particular student's review from this report, you could just click right on their name. So this is the assignment reviewer or certified reviewer that I've been mentioning through a few of our different reports. So when you click on the student's name, it's going to bring you to the landing page for this lesson. So if the student had attempted this particular lesson more than once, they would see that you would see all of those different attempts listed here. Now, if you wanted to review this particular attempt, you would just click right on review, and it would then open the actual assignment for you. So it'll bring you then to the overview page, and then we'll be able to click right through that. So from the overview, we'll be able to see the breakdown of how the student answered the questions, and then click our way through. So here you'll see this first question listed here, and I can see how long the student took on this question up here in the top right corner. If I click here on my question number, I can select to hide correct. So maybe I only want to focus on the incorrect questions. So I could do that easily from here. And again, see that time taken. So it's, in some cases, it may be easy to identify here. Maybe the student didn't get this question right because they didn't spend long enough on it. Or maybe this is a question that I want to cover more in class because the students are spending a lot of time on it, but not doing that well with it. So that's a couple of different options you have for when you're viewing this here. This can also be a good thing to pull up when you are reviewing an assignment with a student. That way you can see exactly the version of the assignment they had. This can also be a helpful place to look if you have any concerns about honesty in terms of the students completing their assignments. If you wanted to go through and see how they're answering and how long they're taking on each question, this can be a good indicator of if the student is really solving the questions themselves or using some sort of technology to help them speed through it. All right. So it can be helpful, even if you don't end up checking this for every student, it can be helpful to be transparent about that with your students, that you do have access to their time on task data, their time per question data. All of that is accessible to you here. Now, if we go back to our assignment results with that full list of students, we also have this analytics tab. So if I switch to the analytics tab, I'd be able to see which questions my students are struggling with the most. So up here at the top of the analytics tab, we have another bar graph showing you again at a glance how your students are performing on the questions. So you can see again with the green, that means that students are successfully answering those questions correctly. The orange in this case is that they are answering the questions incorrectly. So if I scroll down, I'll be able to see all of my questions, the objectives, and the data for each question. I recommend sorting by the incorrect column. You can just do that right by clicking on it. And that will bring to the top the questions that your student seems to struggle with the most. So I could then click right on that question serial number and be able to see an example of that particular question. So maybe I want to use this to locate questions that I want to cover in class. So you could pull up this report in class, and this analytics tab does not show any students' names. So if you did want to use this report in class, you certainly could, and just go over those questions that your students seem to be struggling with the most. So maybe you want to do this the day after the homework assignments due. Maybe you only want to reference this prior to a test review. Or maybe you want to use this over the summer as you are refreshing your courses. Maybe this is a good report to identify questions that if the students are struggling with them, maybe that's one you want to swap out on your future assignments. Or maybe on the other hand, if you have questions that every single student seems to be getting them right, maybe you want to swap that out for a more difficult question. So all of that data is available again to you here under the Analytics tab. And you would just be able to click right on a serial number to view those results or to view what that question looks like. All right. So that wraps up everything I wanted to show you here in terms of Assignment Reviewer, and those are the reports I wanted to highlight with you here up in our key reports. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at our Q&A to see if we have any questions here. All right. So here it shows, let's see, we have an instructor who asked, will the emailing based on activity work with the deep linking of the Hawks software? So the deep linking would be in terms of using Hawks with an LMS. So if you are deep linking your assignments, let's see. So if you're deep linking your assignments, those grades are still going back into the Hawks gradebook. So those grades will all still be here. It will still be tracking their time on task data. All of that will be here. If you email them through search by criteria, that email will be going to their Hawks account. So however they choose to access Hawks, whether it be through one of the deep links in your course or whether it be through the actual Hawks website, they're always going to be seeing those emails there, but they also automatically forward out to the email address that the student signed up for Hawks with. So if they're going through your LMS, it's going to be their school email. So those emails will be forwarding out as well. So they will see them both within Hawks, regardless of whether they click the traditional single sign-on link, they log in through our website, they click on a deep link. Either way, they will always see that messages icon up at the top, and they will also forward out to their school email. Let's see if we have another question here. Now, another question we have, can the list of students who meet students? Okay, so this question is about the automation of the search by criteria report. So unfortunately, that report is not set to be automated currently. I definitely can put in a request for that to be made an option in the future, so I can enter a future request to consider in a future update. Kind of our first step in that direction was adding the save filters option. So at least it does save you a few clicks each time you come to this report if you do want to run that same set of filters repeatedly. So that is an option for saving the filters to save you a little bit of time, but I do understand it may be a nicer option to have those actually emailing to you directly, or, you know, perhaps just, you know, being run for you, so they're just sitting there waiting to export or whatever you'd like to do with the data. So like I said, that isn't currently functionality, but I am more than happy to submit that suggestion for you. All right, and the final question I wanted to bring up was actually one that I received from an instructor the other day when I was working with them. So I figured it would be helpful to share with all of you. And again, while I'm talking, if you have any last minute questions, feel free to enter those into the Q&A. But I had an instructor who uses diagnostic testing. So they have the setting enabled to have their diagnostic test set to 80%. So students who answer 80% or more of the questions on a particular lesson correctly are placed out of that assignment, so they are given credit for it immediately. And they were asking if there was a way to easily see which lessons their students were placing out of. So if you're unfamiliar with our diagnostic testing, that's something that can be easily done under assignments and web tests. It's just an additional setting that you would be able to put that in place. But under reports, and all the way down at the bottom, we have a diagnostic certifications report. And this report will very easily show you for your particular section, if you do have a diagnostic test, which lessons your students placed out of based on the diagnostic versus they actually did the assignment. So you could come in here, if you had the results here, you'd be able to see, you know, my first student in this class successfully placed out of lessons 1.1, 1.4, and 1.5. And then I would know the rest of those lessons, their credit was from them actually doing those lessons on their own. So that's another handy report to keep in mind. It looks like we may have one more question here. Let's see. Yes, so in the completion, so this question is about the red asterisks in the completion or in the all student scores report. So those asterisks are what are our indicator that you have made a change to that student's, in this case, I believe it is the student's grade that you've changed. So let's just check that legend to be sure. But yes, so those two asterisks indicate that the student score has been manually edited. So with our data here, this is of course just our sample grade book with our sample data. So some of these grades have been entered manually, which is what you're seeing there. But that's all that those indicate. Likely if your students are completing their assignments in a traditional classroom setting and you're not changing their grades, you know, giving them credit for grades or any of the assignments, you wouldn't see very many of these asterisks here. And then let's see. Okay, so another question we have here is about, there was a particular student that an instructor noticed had tried Certify 9 times without accessing practice at all. They said, I thought that after a few failures, students were required to do practice before attempting Certify again. So that is something that is actually not part of our default setting. So that is an optional setting. So the default is that if a student goes into a lesson, they can automatically jump right into Certify and attempt that. If they are unsuccessful, they do not reach that mastery percentage, the courseware automatically takes them out of Certify and places them back into practice, where it gives them a customized set of questions based on what they were missing. So that's that adaptive piece of Hawks. Now, there is nothing by default holding the student there in practice to actually work on those questions. They can just jump right back into Certify. So in that case where we were looking at that particular student, we were seeing 9 attempts at Certify, meaning they were likely trying to guess their way through. So they were getting put back in practice, but then jumping right back into Certify. Now, an option we have under assignments and then curriculum is to enable our require practice feature. So the require practice feature is what you're talking about with your question there. And that is right here up at the top. So what you can do with this is allow students to unsuccessfully attempt certify maybe 1 or 2 times before requiring practice. So if a student is feeling confident, they can jump right into certify, go ahead and try it. If they're successful and they reach mastery, great, they're finished with that lesson. If they do not reach mastery and they get put back into practice, they still can jump into certify again and ignore practice. However, if you have this setting in place and they try certify a second time, but do not successfully reach that mastery percentage again, this time when it sends them back to practice with that customized set of questions, it's actually going to hold them there and actually lock up certify before they can get back into certify. So in this case, if you leave the setting at 80%, it would request that the student at least attempts 80% of those practice problems before certify will unlock itself. So they don't have to get 80% of the practice problems right. They do just need to attempt 80% of them. So that's how that require practice feature would work. After the student completes those 80% of the practice problems, certify would unlock again, and they could continue to try certify as much as they'd like. Now, what we generally do see, and likely if you've been using Hawks for a while, what you do see is that if students are really thoroughly spending their time in practice and using those learning aids where they need them, typically by the time they get to certify, they're well prepared and can really get through in just a couple attempts at the most, really 1 to 2. All right. And it looks like that is all we have for questions. So I appreciate all of you taking the time to meet with me today. I did want to point out that here up at the top, or I have it open already, but if you did want to refer to any of the recordings we've had in our training series so far, those are accessible through our blog. So that's just blog.hawkslearning.com. Under webinars, you'll see this list. Training is down at the bottom. And when you select training, you will see our summer 2020 webinar series. So under that, you will have access to any of the recordings from our webinar series the past few weeks. And you will also see the descriptions for the upcoming ones that remain. So, and be able to register through here as well. So as soon as those are ready, those will be accessible to you right from here. We'll also send out a few reminders of these recordings over the summer, just so that if you wanted to go back and reference anything, you certainly can. All right, so that wraps things up for us today. Like I said, I appreciate your time. If you do have any questions that you think of later on, feel free to ask those of your training and support representative that's designated for your school, or feel free to email us at training@hawkslearning.com. All right, well, I appreciate your time today, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week.